think. I would like to go to Stanislas ZEZE from Côte d'Ivoire. It's interesting to see that quite a few people changed their opinion about government intervention in the economy, whether it is a good thing or not. Generally in Africa, it seems to be quite a good thing, although people are in favor of continue to be in favor of open markets, particularly in West Africa, actually. And I wonder how you judge the results of the survey on this issue, Stanislas.
Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I think it reflects the general feeling. I don't know when exactly the survey has been conducted, but it seems to me that everybody agrees on the fact that it is the affair of the government to take care of its people in case of a pandemic like this. However, the way the different governments have been handling this situation have actually progressively changed the mind of people. And a lot of countries, because we speak to a lot of people, because we have actually written different papers on the subject, a lot of people started to believe that in Africa, most countries have actually taken measures that are not adequate to the environment, to the social economic realities, which also have caused certainly more damage than resolve the issue of the pandemic. Today, we all can see that this pandemic will have more economic and social consequences on the continent than health consequences. Things seems to stabilize. We haven't reached that devastating state that the whole world have actually predicted for Africa. And you have countries who actually have not taken any measures at all. I've done Benin, for instance, I've done a lot of sensibilization. I've done a lot of control over people coming in the country, going out of the country. And then the social distancing, the hygiene. And they only have 36 cases and 1 dead after 2 months since the outbreak. So people starting to realize that the measures that have been taken at first were necessary, but government should have actually assessed the situation as they go along and adjust the measure based on the reality. If you take the continent, most of countries in the continent have a very informal economy. And obviously closing down, locking down all the businesses will have a drastic economic consequences on these countries. However, it was necessary at first, but once they started to realize that, or they started to take the health measures and realize that the pandemic was not spreading rapidly like other places, they should have adjusted the different measures that have taken. Because today, we're realizing that the economic consequences are starting to hit the countries very, very, very drastically. And if you see countries like Côte d'Ivoire and other countries around the region, people are starting to unlock themselves without waiting for government decision. They're starting to reopen the business, which actually weakens the governments because they have taken measures to lock down. They haven't taken contrary measures, and people started to unlock themselves, open the business because they believe that all the measures that have been announced, the government did not follow through with. All the money, all the funds that have been put in place in terms of budget have not been distributed to small businesses and to people in general. That obviously they started to unlock themselves. So as we go along in this situation, I guess the trust that people had in government at the start of the pandemic starting to actually reduce, as you can see in the survey. So today is important that most of the government in Africa are starting to take the reality of things and starting to readjust the measures that they're taking based on the evolution of the pandemic and based on the reality of the environment. Otherwise, unfortunately for them, The biggest crisis is not going to be a health crisis, but it's going to be an economic and social crisis.
I would like to go back up north again to Côte d'Ivoire, to Stanislas ZEZE. You have, of course, as CEO of the Bloomfield Investment Corporation, a lot of experience of responses in Côte d'Ivoire, but also beyond. And I wonder how you see the result of the survey, Stanislas.
I see, like I said earlier, I think that people are willing to give up some of the freedom or most of the freedom in cases like this, where you have a pandemic and everybody panic and everybody believe that the role of the government is to protect everybody. So obviously they're willing at the start to give up some of the freedom, stay home and follow all the restriction. But then again, the trust that the individual who's starting to have in the government in handling this pandemic will be based on two main things. The way the situation is being handled on a daily basis and reported. So second thing is transparency. In Africa, unfortunately, transparency is not necessarily something that people, leaders adore. Is as if they believe that they're managing their own personal business rather than realizing that they're managing the public affairs. So the lack of transparency will actually more and more put people in some sort of doubt. And this is unfortunately what is happening. And when people are starting to doubt, obviously, they're starting to wonder and they're starting to be less willing to continue to accept that the government actually prevent them from their own liberty. And this is what's starting to happen, where people starting to unlock themselves without government permission. And I think someone said, I mean, from Kenya says that the lady from Kenya says that people starting to hide to get out and then have a drink. This is also a way to show that they're no longer willing to accept that the government actually prevent them from the liberty. But obviously, they cannot openly say that. So also, we talked about the opportunity that this is represent for Africa. I think this is a very, very important point. I think this crisis have shown a lot of government in Africa are very weak. And they realize that, and our infrastructure are weak, especially health infrastructure. And we realize that all the infrastructure also are weak, because when you actually do the assessment of the overall assets to be able to handle this pandemic, the African countries have realized how weak they are. So this is an opportunity to start thinking of the new way to modernize the economy or to transform the economy, okay? Because this time is a health pandemic. It could be something else next time. It could be another crisis. And we know that after this health crisis will be followed by economic crisis and social crisis. There'll be crisis. I mean, that will happen in the life of a country. And we understand that, we know that. But I think that for African countries, most of them have been independent for the past 60 years. So they haven't, this is the first time they actually really encountering a pandemic at this level. There've been Ebola, we've seen Ebola, but it was not globalized like this pandemic. So this one is the very first experience of African country with handling a pandemic that is as serious as this one. So they're starting to realize how weak the countries are. So this is an opportunity for them to start thinking over and rethink the budget, rethink the priority, rethink the transformation of the economy to be more resilient, because they're not resilient at all. They just realized that. And the lady from South Africa said it very well. Even South Africa, that everybody thought would be the most resilient country within this pandemic, because of the way things are handled, we see a very big weakness there also. So this is a real opportunity for African country to rethink the model, to rethink the model, and then to make sure that what is being put in place now is actually something that is adequate to the environment, adequate to the reality, so that they can be more resilient in case of crisis. And this is something that Africans should take very seriously. This pandemic should create an electroshock so that they can sit down, open the discussion with the private sector, with the civil society, and starting to reflect on the new model that will actually help Africa become more and more resilient. So this is to be it's a question of revolution and mentality, and we're hoping to observe that in the weeks to come.
And then we'll go to Stanislas for some concluding words.
Okay, thank you. I think that I'm not going to repeat what my other friend have said, but I think that to conclude, I would say that when it comes to Africa, contrary to Europe, where I believe, as you said, country was starting to be more individualistic in terms of rethinking their own model, Africa, this is the opportunity for more Pan-Africanism, for more mutualization. This is very, very, very important. We realize that we have basically weak countries, except few, like South Africa, Morocco, Kenya. Most of the other countries are very weak. So mutualization will be the future for Africa. And this is really the opportunity to rethink this model, to think about it. The second thing is that Africa has to start to specialize countries in this option of mutualization, specialized country in different things. Because when it comes to each country doing its own thing, when you take airline, for instance, except 4 airlines in the continent, all the other airlines are very, very small airlines and not profitable and also not really effective and efficient. Africa had a model before called Air Afrique, which was a mutualization of all of most African countries in one company. It worked very well. Mismanagement actually took that company down, but it was a very, very good model. So this is something that Africa should really think about. And this is the opportunity for the ZLECAf, okay, the free trade, to really, if you will, there was some skepticism. And I think this opportunity shows that there's no reason to be skeptical about having a free trade in Africa. This is the solution for this continent. This is the future for this continent. So African countries have to start working together, consolidate the force in order to have better infrastructure, in order to be able to respond to this pandemic. Because when you see the way it's been handled at the continental level, it's been only decision, but few very practical actions. And because of the fact that the strategy was not consolidated enough, the union did not have enough means to actually act. So this is really an opportunity for me, to me, beyond the consequences that Africa will actually have to deal with it. And I'm sure that they'll be able to deal with it at one point. But if Africa should retain something for this pandemic, it is an opportunity for the continent to actually get together, reinforce its cohesion, reinforce its capacity to work together, and then put a model that is adequate to this continent, starting to develop South-South relationship. Very, very important. And we see, and all this could be done through, taking advantage of digitalization. We've seen the importance of digitalization in the process of handling this pandemic. So this could be also a venue for Africa to actually capitalize on, to move forward in this, reinforcing the union and reinforcing mutualization. Thank you.